Yeah, everybody hear me okay? I'm just going to change the program. I'm going to talk before Peter John, and the reason I thought we'd do that is that the general consensus here is we're talking about the same thing, and we understand that the training can be improved, and we need to train the trainers. We need to teach the instructors. That's really cool. So I'm just going to run through this slide really quick, this slideshow really quick, because it took me hours and hours and hours to build it, and I'll feel remorse if I didn't present it. But we don't have to labour on it because I think we're getting the same picture. But then Peter's going to talk about what GFA's done in their initial and continuing training, and then that's going to lead into Neil, which will then lead into how do we train an instructor with David. And I think that that'll be a better flow. So if you just bear with me, there is some, I've tried to make it entertaining for the afternoon, so we'll make a start. So we've got a whole bunch of resources. We talked about them all. There are a few more there. FCL 745, 12011, DOC 111, and AC 12103. And we all know that it's all for high altitude, and we'll talk a bit more about that. CA resources, New Zealand CAA got a great set of slides and resources there, and you can download little PNG files of aeroplanes and all that stuff for using online. So what's for us, John's talked about this, we're all familiar with it. It talks about requirements for UPRT, for other sectors not in the 8.6 tonne or 30 passengers. And as we said, watch this space. Everybody seen this chart? Yes? It's a great chart. We're going to look at it. So where are we currently at right now? Like I said, we'll just whiz through it, bit of entertainment. We're all talking the same thing. Here's the timeline of pilots in 2022. Here is our 0 hour stud. He's ready to attack the world of aviation. Where's him on this chart? He's unconscious, incompetent, regardless of how many hours he has on his flight simulator at home. Doesn't matter. Then we got the guys and girls who have just achieved their RPC, RPL, and on their flight test, they're like this. Okay? They're hopefully there. Reality says they're probably here. And how many people, show of hands, have seen people about here? So one of the questions we ask is something to think about with regards to people coming to do UPRT is what is their competency level when they walk in the door versus what is their competency and confidence level when they walk out the door. And Shane talked about it just briefly before. Now we've got our 100-hour pilot. That's him. We don't have to talk any more about that. He just fits in there. That's where he is and she is. Not so many girls, I don't think. But have you come across any, Emma? The 100-hour superstar? No? No? Must be a male thing there.
Yeah, I've had a couple.
You had a couple? Okay, cool. CPLs, here they are with their shiny government debt, all ready to go and attack the world. Where are they on the chart? Well, we would hope that they're going to be there. All right. And then we got the graduates who are looking for their first job. And where does all aspiring pilots go in Australia to get their first job? They go out to the farm. If you're in Canada, it's working for Buffalo Joe up in Yellowknife. And he, what the hell have I done? A tow job, but there's no stuck out on the farm. Where is he going to be, or she going to be? Where are they going to be on this chart? Well, they graduated unconscious competent, we would hope, but because of the time period and how much flying, depends how many water pumps need to be collected from Darwin from the station. Back around here, maybe a bit better, we would hope. Then we got the people who get into the airlines, and that's where they start in the right-hand seat. All good. All right. RA and GA pilots pre-qualification. It's before they get an RPC or an RPL. That's here in this area. Talking about stalls, they're going to do stalls in accordance with the CASA Day VFR syllabus as per the Part 61 MOS. How many people have had people come in the door and you ask them, what sort of stalls did you do in basic training? Most of the people I get say wings level, 1G, idle, stall, recovery. Do they ever say, oh, I did stalls at a turn, I did approach configuration, I did full power stalls? They mainly just say wings level, 1G, idle, stall. Agree? Yeah? To teach stalls, there's a large brief, a lot of preparation, practice for one lesson, maybe one more. Might do basic unusual attitude. So we've got a minimal retention of training, and loss of control does not give you time to do a hassle check. So then we've got the post-certification non-commercial pilots. These are the career RV pilots and all that type of people. What are they going to be getting for their continuing training? Well, if they do stalls, they probably won't see it again unless they decide to go do an aerobatic endorsement. Do a refresher for a flight review, maybe. If they undertake UPRT, practice them of their own choice, maybe. Actually encounter one during a real upset, and majority of non-commercial pilots are probably going to be in the category E. All agree? Yep. And then we're going to have the commercial pilots who either weren't fortunate enough to get a job or decided it's not for them, but they still want to sort of fly, so they're going to join that little queue there. Commercial pilots, stalls, further exposure to unusual attitudes, perhaps a spin endorsement if they're going to get a flight instructor rating, and then on their first job, maybe they'll get guidance from their employer, probably not, and their daily operations are not structured, so it's just like, go and get the plane out of the shed, we've got to go up and get something, or however it's going to run where they are. These pilots here, regulatory required structured operations, but in synthetic training only. So we've got currently no UPR content. It's just sort of a graphical representation of what Shane was talking. Not likely unless you go to a flight review with a UPRT instructor. Not really regulatory required, and not likely on graduation. Not regulated unless it's a 12103 requirement, and UPRT required structured operations. So we've got nothing here, nothing here, nothing here, nothing here, nothing. So where is the primacy? I'm just whizzing through this because we're all on the same page. So what's our angle of attack for improvement in flight training? We need to be aware of what's out there and how it's being delivered. This is the Cessna 172M stall speed chart that talks about lots of speeds. There is a note at the beginning of the POH that says angle of attack is important, but for us to represent angle of attack across the operational envelope of the aeroplane, we're going to refer to airspeed. Okay, so again, the focus is on airspeed. ATSB have these avoidable accident flyers. Some pretty good reading there. Does anybody know about those? They're bringing them back in. I was talking to the ATSB last week, and they're starting to bring these back in. Managing partial power loss after takeoff in a single engine aircraft. Maintain glide speed. The primary focus on maintaining airspeed to prevent stalling. Again, is a document that's telling new pilots and existing pilots, what's your airspeed? Rather than, is my attitude in the appropriate place for the power and flap setting to achieve the airspeed that I want? This is the reference from the Doc 111, and it talks about what Shane touched on before. Aerodynamics are the same across all the boards, but they may have different implications on depending upon what airframe you're flying, and that's one of the questions that I asked when I first put up the website was, should we have separate training for King Air? Can you train somebody in a King Air and it's in a drifter? Is there a difference there? What's the thoughts?
One of the comments made by people I've talked to is, first of all, any exposure to the extended envelope for any type is useful throughout your career, even if you never fly that type again.
Yep.
Second is, just because one type looks like another type doesn't mean that you can transfer the skills without talking to people who are subject matter experts on that.
Right.
And so somewhere between those two bookends lies a world where stuff is useful. And that would include people who come out of another world into your world to do a 3-day course.
Yep.
Go back into that world.
Yep.
Where they've got 115,000 pound of thrust engines on each wing, etc. An engine bigger than a 737 fuselage, but still what they learned in your world or a 737 is still useful.
Absolutely. And I think where it comes down to is, with the Part 61, I think whoever put into it the general competency statement was spot on the money. And we don't reinforce that enough. It's sort of like we talked about just before lunch or earlier in the day about the language that we should be using as modern aviators. Need to include words like stick stall position, or the stall stick position, unload, angle of attack, general competency. So with the technology, I've seen it many, many times where I'll do a flight review with somebody in an RV6 with 2 glass screens, no round dials, and by the time we get to 1,500 feet, he's dialed up his flight plan, locked in all the frequencies he needs for the next bit, and engaged the autopilot. And he hasn't even taken his head out of the cockpit since he's left the ground. So being aware, and then you get him into a round dial aeroplane, and he can't fly the aeroplane because he's got no TV screen to look at. When I did my grade 3 instructor rating, I was given a choice. I said, I've got 2 172s out there, one with steam instruments and one with a Gamma 1000. Which one do you want to fly? I said, I'll take the steam, thanks. And you don't want to fly the Gamma 1000? I said, I'm here to learn to be an instructor. I'm not here to learn how to fly the Gamma 1000. And that's what I need to fly, because I'm not competent on that. So we need to keep that in mind.
Paul, just on that last bit about different aircraft characteristics, plane, being a plane, being a plane, not being a plane.
Yeah.
Paul Bertarelli, an aviation advisor, did a very good article in 2012 on LSA and LSA accidents. They did a 7-year study on FAA-based data, and they found that, obviously, the compared to the Bengal 152, why were they having so many more loss of control, particularly RLOCs, in LSA aircraft? And it was very much down to inertia, twitchiness, if you like, light controls, low wing loading, all those sorts of things, where environmental factors play a part and so on. And they broke that down into all the elements. And you're right about general competency, and we've got it in 2.01 at the moment as type training, which covers, and the new ops manual is going to cover basically the general competency where all the PJ actually in the back there, because he's been doing a lot of work on our ops for our with Jill. So this is the irony we've got, particularly at our end of the market. 30 years ago, we had frustrated airline pilots that weren't getting stick time and weren't gliding, and they'd come back and buy an ultralight and kill themselves.
Yep.
So we put a 5-hour conversion time in, because there are differences in aircraft type. We wouldn't go and fly 747 having an ultralight license. It would take us 100 hours to even get anywhere near like what we were doing.
Yeah.
Likewise, it works the other way. No one's better, we're just different.
Yeah, exactly right.
And now we're in a situation where we're going to go to heavier aircraft.
Yep.
And when I speak to all the FOIs and all the flight schools that are in Part 61 and RAIs, they're saying the minute we get somebody through from an RAI's flight certificate into a 172 Warrior or whatever they've got is about 7 to 10 hours.
Yep.
Because it takes them that long to understand the differences in the aircraft.
100%. And we get it all the time. We get people knock on the door and say, I want to get an RPL predicated upon my RPC. Was it a couple of circuits and then you sign me off? Sorry, dude, you come to the wrong school for that. And then likewise back the other way. You get somebody, we've had many commercial pilots want to save some bucks, come and try and fly the Technam. And you cannot manhandle the Technam the same way you manhandle the Cessna, because it's too light and it glides different. It's really entertaining to go and do the first session of circuits with somebody in a Technam after they've been flying a Cessna, because it's just go around after go around after go around, because it just doesn't come down like a Cessna.
And tying that back to today's conference, upset risk increases when primacy and aircraft type differences are
Correct.
at different ends of the spectrum.
Correct.
So this is where, the type training becomes so important, but it will bring unstitch at the very edges.
Yes.
If the primacy is not there.
Correct.
You'll find all the skeletons in the closet.
100%. So why do we need to have a flight training syllabus? Now, Shane mentioned before that the syllabus hasn't changed for decades, lots of decades. Neil knows that this has been one of my pet projects for a while, is to try and find the first syllabus of flight training, the very first.
I should have bought it.
I've got it.
You got the
It's here.
You got the little 20-page green book.
No, even before that.
Oh, okay.
So why do we need to train this? So here we go. Another timeline story. 1903, these guys just made it up as they went along, because there was no frame of reference. 1914, beginning of World War I. I found a couple of documents. One guy in Canada did his thesis on initial flight training in the military. And it's a really, really interesting read if you're into that. 1914, they were sending pilots out with 10 hours of training, and the upper echelon of the Royal Air Force, or no, it wasn't even the Royal Air Force at the time, of the military in the UK, was saying it's like murder. We're sending these boys out to get murdered. What are we doing? 1917. This guy, Mr. Smith Barry, he's, you know who he is. Anybody else know who this gentleman is? Yeah, the military guys in the room will probably know. He's referred to in the documents as the father of military flight training. And he produced this document, which is the first instructor flight training course in September 1917. And we'll just go through it in a couple of, it'll be online, you can dissect it. Demonstrate use of controls and their effects. Straight flying, level and climbing. Turning. Landing in a crosswind. Forced landings. Are we seeing a trend here? But they did do looping, rolling, spinning, stalling turns and manoeuvres against other machines. There's formation flying, spinning and aerobatics in their basic training. This is predicated over 5 lessons minimum. And they're off, solo. And I think the requirement that they were talking about, if he didn't crash too many times, he could go off on his own. That was the requirement. talk about our quit stalling or spin in. This is the US Navy training. Again, they didn't know anything about angle of attack, but it's the same still. Anybody familiar with this document? Old salts in the room. Thank you, Peter.
Just a comment, when I was teaching flying instructors or students to be flying instructors at the Gold Coast, I brought in a copy of the CASA 1988 version of flying instructor manual, and I told those students that I thought it was far better than the current version, which contains a lot of extraneous and incorrect material in my view. So as a comment overall, I've been listening to this saying that flying instruction syllabuses may not have changed over the years, which is broadly speaking true. What has changed, again going back to what a lot of you have been saying, is the delivery of that instruction. There's nothing wrong with the flying training syllabus. Nothing at all apart from some of the good shit's been taken out of it. But basically it's always been the same. It works. It's not working now because it's not delivered properly.
And that's where we're going. It's excellent. That's perfect. Does everybody agree with that statement?
Yeah.
100%. So this document here, 45, 1965, placed recently with the 2006. Okay. Now, our Robert Smith Barry gentleman from 1917, there's a typo there. The words danger and nerves must not. Then I didn't fix that because I just snipped it from the reference from the Gosport. That September 1917 is called the Gosport System of Flight Training. There's some interesting language being spoken here by Mr. Smith Barry that I think we're missing, and it's like what we're talking about here. You've all read that, but the important thing here is instead of telling them it's dangerous to go there, we need to take them there so that they know how to get back. Here's a snip from another document. Not to be led away from potentially dangerous manoeuvres, but exposed to them in a controlled environment so they could learn to recover instinctively. Does anybody know where that's from? Nope. This is in the foreword of that document right there. Now the 1965 document included spins and aerobatics. This one does not. Does anybody know who said that?
He says it a lot.
He says it a lot.
Confucius.
Yeah, Confucius. So something to think about. Would there have been a different outcome if the pilot's ab initio instructor had taught him the importance of stick position? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was said 16 times on the tapes. I don't understand it. I'm back, still going down.
All recovery could be effective, not long.
I think in one of the reports I read, or the information I read, that the angle of attack at the time it hit the ocean was 42 degrees or 45 degrees. Insane. I don't know.
So the aircraft on the ground, so it's shots. It doesn't think that's what you do.
So I think the thing that's really important here is that if he had got taught back here about stick position, he probably wouldn't.
Well, look, I like these checks again, just from my own experience.
Yeah.
I flew Boeings and Airbuses with an airline. And when I did that, I used to take the flight director's autopilot order from out at 35,000 feet and fly it all the way to the deck.
Right.
That was over 20 years ago. I spoke to a chap at Archfield who was a second officer of mine on an A340 once, and he remembers me doing that. He says, if I did that now, I'd get fired.
Yeah.
For knowing how to fly my aircraft.
Yeah.
So a lot of these guys have probably never actually flown an airline.
Yeah, 100%. It's more about procedures, and you fail your check right if you switch that switch before you switch that switch.
So you've got to keep your currency in your...
Let me just tell you a story about what a gentleman who came in to fly with us in the last 3 weeks, and this is an overarching story about where we are with the vet fee situation and people getting trained to a price tag, not to a standard. This particular individual clearly has a passion for it. He last flew in 2016 and presented me his Car 5 pilot's license that was stamped as a student pilot. This was after he told me that he had 140 hours total time, including multi-engine aircraft, of which he had 50 hours piloting command. He had completed 6 of his 7 commercial pilot theory exams, which had elapsed because he'd stopped flying in 2016. He'd been to 2 facilities for vet fee, and at one of them, if the aeroplane had an autopilot installed in the aircraft, once the aircraft was on initial, he was to engage the autopilot and utilise the equipment fitted to the aircraft. So now I'm dealing with a guy who's very passionate about flying. He is pretty much shit scared about flying an aeroplane. He's in debt for a lot of money, and he has a student pilot license. But he's got the intestinal fortitude to walk into another flight school and say, can you help me? And I just, whoa. I said, come back next Tuesday and let's have a chat about it. We turn a lot of people away. But the thing is, I had to wrap my head around how to best help this guy. And the only thing that I could think about to do with him is say, go and do your RPL theory exam, and let's get you an RPL. So you can fly within 25 nautical miles around here. We'll go. And he could fly okay. It's not, I said, it's not going to take you long to land the aeroplane, meet the competency standards for an RPL, do forced landings and stuff, and just get some command time. Just go out and fly. But I want to be a commercial pilot. One spoonful of the elephant at a time. You've got a confidence problem, but he's been a product of a system that we've created. And when I don't say us in this room, I'm saying about the Australian aviation. It's not just Australia, it's worldwide with the pilot shortage. Is there one? Is there not one? That's a discussion for another day. But what we've got is we've got a lot of people going in with dreams and the product that we're getting back. And then we go one step forward is they can't get that job out on the station. So they go and get another $25,000 loan and they become a flight instructor to then go back and get employed by the same school that trained them so that they can now train the next series of vet fee students. and we have a decreasing cycle. And this is where we need to do this work. So I thought that that would be better for me to talk about that, so that now we can move forward. I really want to thank you guys and girls who are online and even listening to the recording in the future. That I know that there was a lot of, we've all seen this before this morning, but it set the baseline. And we're all in agreement. I'm just so pleased that we're all moving forward in the same direction. So now we can talk to Neil and Peter and David on their views of how we can start looking to fix these things and move forward. So I might just get Peter to come up, and he's going to talk about what GFA is doing and what they've done, because they spend a lot of their time near the stall at Angles of Bank in thermal activities, in close proximity with no formation endorsements, and sharing a thermal. I remember in a thermal with one thermal, the first thermal of the day, we're all trying to scratch away to get up to height, and there's like 15, 20 gliders all in a column within 3,000 feet of each other. And it just works.
300 feet of each other.
No, within 3,000 feet, that 15 to 20 gliders in that 3,000 feet, all trying to scratch together, but it works. So I'll hand over to Peter.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, one point.
Do you want the presentation?
Just flash back to
Yeah, no.
several slides back.
Sorry,
I can move them. Yeah, let's see if it stores in that.
after the other.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Hang on.
Well,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Do you want to go back?
Yeah, that one there.
I know the manual of standards that we publish is a daunting document. It's in 6 separate sections, and it's in 3 or 4 different PDF files, Word files, and it covers a lot of stuff that some of us will never do, including like flight engineering proficiency checks. But if you do, as we have done, in order to get an understanding of what requirements for instructor training, for example, are, I did the simple task of downloading from the CASA website or the Australian Government Attorney General's Department website the 6 separate documents that form the manual of standards for Part 61, making one big document out of it, turning it into a PDF file so I could use a word search.
Yep.
If you do that and you go to table, I think it's 3-3 in document 111, you'll get a list of everything you would need to do, including manual handling, to be a proficient UPRT trainee, and indeed for an instructor eventually.
Right.
If you go through that manual of standards, you'll find that the only areas that are not currently mandated in that are the UPRT handling elements,
Right.
like slow flight, recovery from nose high, wing down, etc. There's about 6 of them. Nearly everything else is already in the mods somewhere or another. Okay. So, for example, to get a multi-crew cooperation training course, you have to have done ATPL human factors, even if it's just you and a mate flying DC-3 that you own privately. Right. Etc. There's a bit of discipline in doing that because it's an evening's work,
Yeah.
but it will show that there's an awful lot of stuff already there waiting for us as an authority maybe to build the UPRT element, but it'll be building from what's already there. So don't be daunted by the X's. They're sort of light X's, if you like.
Right.
A lot of that stuff's there. It's worth searching for. If someone comes to you and says, I've got a commercial license, you say, well, you should know this, even if you only learned it, even if you learned it 10 years ago.
Sure.
So just that.
Are you familiar with that one, Dave?
Sorry, what do you mean, that one? Hundreds of...
Yeah, that table with the UPRT. We can discuss that a bit later. I think there's 2 important things here we've uncovered today. One is specific UPRT, and then the review of the current syllabus to input UPRT-like activities that can help create that law of primacy. So I think that that's two separate things. Would you all agree on that?